Good afternoon, everybody, family, friends. Um, so today's topic is going to be involving classism and racism and how that shows up in today's America, and how I believe it is the um, the cause of the ongoing homelessness crisis and the economic collapse of our country. So, to get this topic started, I just kind of wanted to go over a few basic definitions that I think will be sure that we're all on the same page as far as what we're talking about, and how racism exists within our own communities as well as classism. So these are things that even as Black people, we can be discriminating against our own people in ways that we're not even aware of. And I just believe it's time to have this conversation. So, as far as definitions for racism, the one that I wanted to focus on is the second one, and this is the one of these dictionaries. Let me see. So, the second definition, which I think applies mostly, it's kind of like the everyday use that we hear about, and it is the systemic oppression of a racial group to the social, economic, and political advantage of another, specifically white supremacy, sense, institutional racism. One of the many rules is racism achieves is the virtual erasure of historical contributions by people of color. And this was a statement made by Angela Y. Davis. And in the discussion of discriminatory housing practices, redlining neighborhoods, underfunded education, lack of access to health care, racial profiling, police brutality, and mass incarceration are just a few examples of cage wires that altogether contribute to structural racism. Um, so here's a lot of different ways that it's been used in sentences by public speakers and public figures. Um, let's see, people of color, low income people, and indigenous people have been made especially vulnerable through decades of environmental racism. Policies that intentionally concentrate pollution and toxic hazards in our communities. And another definition is a political or social system founded on racism and designed to execute its principles. In 1913, the Native Land Act reserved 90% of the country for whites, who then made up 21% of the population. Under the formalized racism of apartheid, 3.5 million blacks were forcibly moved to isolated reservations called homelands. And this is from The Economist uh, publication called The Economist. So that's racism. Now we want to talk about classism. Let's see if there's a way for me to. No, I can't blow it up. So, classism. Classism is differential treatment based on social class or perceived social class. Classism is the systemic oppression of subordinate class groups to advantage and strengthen the dominant class groups. It's the systemic assignment of characteristics of worth and ability based on social class. This would involve individual attitudes and behaviors, systems of policies and practices that are set up to benefit the upper classes at the expense of the lower classes, resulting in drastic income and wealth inequality. The rationale that supports these systems and this unequal valuing and the culture that perpetuates them. This just goes into more definitions related to um, class and classism and the privilege and the fact that you can have class allies. And these are people or a person from the more privileged classes whose attitudes and behaviors are anti-classist, who is committed to increasing his or her own understanding of this issue related to classism and actively working towards eliminating classism on many levels. I think this is a good place to start to have the conversation simply because a lot of times we like to pretend that racism doesn't exist anymore. But I think we all can really acknowledge without feeling like we're being racist on our own that classism does exist, depending on the type of money that you make or the type of neighborhoods that you live in. You are placed in a type of a category, and that will determine the type of experience that you have in America. So I think I wanted to kind of, so that I'm not doing all of the talking, I wanted to let you all hear some of a TED Talk video that I was listening to earlier today. And it really explained a lot of what I experienced as an advocate and a person with a disability. The type of environments and the spaces that I find myself encountering, they're not really accustomed to dealing with people um, with lived experience. And so they either look down on us and treat us like we're less than, or they see us as someone challenging their system of inequality. And nobody wants to be called out on practicing racism and classism, but the reality is the our communities and the conditions of everybody that we live around really, um, you don't really have to acknowledge it for you to be able to see it. You know, it has become a norm that people live under bridges and tents. And to me, I don't see how any community of people or um, society should be okay with that. And so this is a lady, and the title of this video is called "Just Belonging: Finding the Courage to Interrupt Bias." And this lady's name is Corey Carew. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, um, but I'm just going to play some of it. And she's an attorney, from my understanding.
After this talk is done, and when you find yourself in debate,
fair use, and I'm gonna take myself out
remember one very simple
while we
thing,
let this play.
that you have never locked eyes with another person who is not worthy of freedom,
I can get it together,
of liberty, of connection, and of belonging. I'm going to start by telling you a story of an experience that happened to me several years ago. I went to the courthouse to argue a motion. There was a partner of mine that was with me. We get to the courthouse. Came up and joined us, and as we were walking down, I'm stopped. Of an experience that happened to me several years ago. I went to the courthouse to argue a motion. There was a partner of mine that was with me. We get to the courthouse. We have to argue the motions in chambers. One of the two opposing counsels
family
came up and joined us, and as we were walking down,
I'm doing good. Stopped. I'm just trying to share some stuff.
The sheriff's deputy yells out to me, ma'am, you can't go back there. Ma'am, you can't go back there. And so I pause, I go towards him. And in this interaction, he essentially tells me, you can't go back there because this area is for attorneys only. And so I pause, I smile, and I tell him I'm an attorney. He doesn't believe me. You're an attorney? Let me see your bar card. I pause again. I smile. I show him my bar card. My partner who was with me was a white male, and he chose to take out his bar card and show his bar card as well. And in that moment, the atmosphere changed. Because then the sheriff's deputy began to look at me, my partner, and he realized what he'd done. There were three of us. He only asked for proof from one. At that moment, opposing counsel who was with us, also a white male, began to say, you can take my word for it, we're all attorneys here, we're all attorneys here. The reason I tell you that story is not because it's special, because in my professional life, I've had many experiences like that. At courthouses, with judges, with court staff, at depositions, with colleagues. There are different ways in which people can tell you you're other, you're less than, you don't belong, this table is not for you. There are all kinds of ways in which we other and marginalize people. And I could share those stories with you. What I will tell you about this particular incident is that on the day that this happened, I was flooded with anger and with a warmth that went along with embarrassment and humiliation. That as I was standing there and I paused again and smiled again and held my tongue again, choosing not to point out the inconsistency, that my inner voice was telling me, don't get too loud, use your low voice. Because if you start talking loud, they'll say you sound shrill or worse, hysterical. We've all heard that one. And so I have to navigate this stereotype of the angry Black woman. And you know who she is. You've seen her on TV. She's that woman that some people see anytime a Black woman has an opinion, says her mind, shows passion, or questions the status quo. Stop. Stop. See, this is the place when stories like this are shared that the blustery and sometimes contemptuous responses begin. This is when people begin to say things like, well, you don't know that this had anything to do with race. He didn't say that he stopped you because you were Black. Or what's the problem? They're supposed to check everybody who goes back there towards chambers. He had the right to check you. Or law enforcement have a very tough job. They put their lives at risk to keep us safe. And whatever they ask you to do, you just need to do it. We hear those responses. We hear the responses where people say, here we go, again. Another person of color talking about race, again. Oh, a minority playing the race card. I hear those comments. I read those comments. We experience those comments. And what we do when we react like that to real stories of real people is we find a way to say your story does not matter. The disparate treatment that you experience doesn't matter. Discrimination doesn't matter. Your reality doesn't matter. When we do that, we refuse to give visibility to the truth and the experiences of people. And when we do that around racial injustice or oppression or any kind of bigotry or ism, what we do is we amplify the impact. And I see this. I see that we engage in these conversations that turn into shouting wars. We see it on TV. We see it in the political sphere. We see it in the comment sections of the news. My goodness, the comment sections. That's where good hearts go to die a slow death from the shame trolls. But that's what we've come to in how we engage in difficult discussions. We don't engage. We shout at one another. And I'll give a mild example. One that I sometimes face when I'm trying to convince people of structural and systemic problems that we have to address. And I'm talking about people who are educated, people who are aware, and people who are good-hearted and want to do good things. And it may be something as simple as, we have some issues that we really need to talk about because our professionals of color are facing some obstacles in the organization, and our Black professionals are the ones facing it the worst. And we need to address these issues because part of what's going on is that our leadership doesn't really relate to these issues because they're mostly white and they enjoy a white privilege. White privilege. I hate that word. Why do people always have to talk about white privilege? I don't have privilege. I grew up poor. I understand you grew up poor, but when we're talking about white privilege, we're not talking about poverty. We're talking about benefits that you may receive that you have not earned. And you receive them because of your race, and it's something that other people don't have. I earned everything that I have. I worked hard to get here. I understand you worked hard, but so did I, and so did so many other professionals of color. But it's not an issue of working hard. It's an issue of biases that exist in the organization and barriers. What barriers? I don't believe that. I believe that if you work hard and you follow the rules and you do what needs to be done, you can succeed in this organization. Oh, okay. So you weren't at the implicit bias training session that we did? You know that's not true. You know that there are things that people face that are different. No, I don't, Corey. I don't agree with that. Everybody has their struggles. Everybody has stuff that they go through. But this is not an issue that continues to exist. We've had civil rights laws in this country for years, and I get so sick of people continuing to talk about racism as if it's still here. Okay, I know that we've had civil rights laws on the books, but that does not mean the realities of people have changed that much. You know what, Corey? If there isn't even an issue with race, I believe it's reverse racism. I believe that as a white person, I'm the one who's at a disadvantage. Because the truth is, everybody's talking about all this diversity stuff, and all that means is opportunities that people should have to work for are being given to people who haven't earned it. And in my perspective, in my opinion, it's a sad day in America to be a white man. Whoa, reverse racism? A sad day in America to be a white man. Do you know what it feels like to go to the store and have somebody follow you around like you're a thief? You know what that feels like? You know what it feels like to be going to go pick up your kids from preschool and get pulled over for driving while black and have the police officers pull up on both sides of your vehicle with their hand on their weapon? Do you know what that feels like? Dude, do you know what it feels like to drop your kids off at school and wonder what kind of disparate discipline they'll face? I bet you have no clue what that's about while you're standing here talking to me about a sad day to be a white man in America. I have friends who sit up at night wondering about their kids coming home safe. That's not something that you have to deal with. And let me tell you something. You don't know what it feels like to be walking back to your dorm room with your friends, and as you're walking back, a group of men across the street who are apparently drunk and half-dressed are yelling across at you, nigger, bitch. This is the trash that this college has brought to our town. You don't know what that feels like. You don't know what it feels like to be flooded with anger and to want to say something, but know that you can't. Because if you do, things may escalate and you don't feel safe. And to share that experience with people that you love and have them tell you, it's not a big deal. This is a safe town. Nothing would have happened. You don't know what that feels like. So don't stand here telling me that it's a sad day to be a white man in America. You see what I did?
So I'm going to stop right there with that one, because what she said spoke volumes. Um, as an advocate and a person who advocates against housing and disability discrimination, as well as other forms of discrimination, um, I know what it feels like to not to have to, for one, fight to be respected and heard in front of the people that are discriminating against you, but to also be looked at by family members as though you're making a big deal out of nothing and that you're causing problems for people, when the reality is you're only trying to speak up to hold on to the dignity that you do have left, based on what you've been able to overcome throughout your life, especially when you're growing up in environments that are not very supportive or um, productive. So, and that applies to a lot of African American communities. So to kind of go into the environment of the housing in Tennessee, in Nashville, Tennessee, here is a report that was done by the Red Door Collective, um, and it is titled Nashville Eviction Report. and it's from August of 2021. And this report goes into all of the details surrounding housing in Nashville. And it will say off the rip here in Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville is located in Davidson County, Tennessee. The city has historically been racially segregated, with Black communities being disproportionately displaced by development. In the past decade, there has been unsustainable growth with insufficient investment into affordable housing and renter protections. Many properties have been snatched up by a handful of property owners, particularly following natural disasters. Um, it goes into the amounts of detainer warrants. It says right here the number and rate of detainer warrants issued in Davidson County increased between 2017 and 2019. At least 67% of the cases in 2019 resulted in eviction. Between April 2020 and March 2021, 7,904 detainer warrants were issued. Between October and December 2020, at least 42% of closed cases ended in eviction. It says a few landlords and an even smaller number of attorneys are associated with the majority of eviction cases in Davidson County. Now, what that tells me, based off of my experience, is that certain attorneys are in contract with certain landlords that have control over the majority of the affordable housing properties, and they're the ones evicting everybody. Now let's look at the work that the Red Door Collective has done. And like this report is really good if you all want to look at it in more depth, because it goes into um, the Slum Clearance and Urban Redevelopment Act of 1945 and the Federal Aid Highway Act that contributed to the destruction of predominantly Black neighborhoods, causing a lot of gentrification. Now, bef- before I was evicted in 2018, or right after I was evicted in 2018, I served on the steering committee for Nashville's Home for All organization, and they were part of the Policy Link Anti Displacement Task Force. We went, I think they had this convention thingy in Austin, Texas, where they had us all go there, and we worked for several days, looking at different, designs of communities that were able to help end homelessness in certain areas of Austin, Texas. And so this was in 2018, 2019 that we went and did all of this research, and all of these, cities came together and shared their information. Um, One of the things that I think got overlooked when it was time to report on Nashville's situation when it relates to gentrification and um, evictions is that the right to cancel, which means what we need it to mean is the right to a court appointed counsel, that got swept under the rug, and it made it appear as though, well, everybody has the right to cancel, based on the fact that if you can afford an attorney, everybody has the right to bring an attorney to court. But if you're looking for protections to be put in place, you would want to, legally everybody does have the right to cancel. But if you're trying to enact new laws and bills to make sure that we prevent unnecessary evictions, we want to make sure that we have funding to provide counsel to low income renters. That got misdocumented. I'm gonna put it that way. So from that point on, where we could have used this information to protest and advocate to have right to counsel established for Nashville or in the state of Tennessee, because it didn't get documented correctly, that that need went unaddressed. So because of that, when this COVID-19 crisis hit, um, and tenants were in need of counsel to prevent the evictions, all they had in place was the regular resources that were available, such as legal aid and Tennessee Fair Housing Council. Well, what I had to realize after doing my own advocacy and research, legal aid and Tennessee Fair Housing Council, they are often funded through agencies such as Tennessee Housing Development Agency and the local housing development agencies, such as Metro Housing Development Agency and Murfreesboro Housing Development Agency. Um, if they have contracts with these agencies, what are the chances that you're going to get them to actually represent you when you're saying that one of the agencies actually discriminated against you? Is very slim to none. And so they even go in talking about the diversionary court where they had one of the judges, General Sessions judges, Rachel Bell, founded the Legacy Diversionary Court. And the goal of this court is to mediate evictions. Well, from my experience in the eviction that happened on February the 13th of 2020, Rachel Bell had my case in her court before she created the legacy court, but she transferred my case to circuit court. Um, I wanted it transferred to circuit court, but the reason why she did not put in a judgment based on what was presented in general sessions is that she was saying that circuit court would be better able to handle the fair housing um, violations that I had, listed in my counter complaint. And my issue is that if she's equipped enough to create a legacy court, a legacy diversionary court, and the goal of it is to mediate evictions, why was she not able to use some of those skills when I needed it to prevent my eviction? She's, intentionally chose not to use the knowledge that she has about disability rights, because as a person with a disability, speaking of Rachel Bell, that was one of the defenses that she used when they were trying to fire her because she was habitually late to work. So if she's able to bring up her rights as a person with a disability based on whatever medical conditions she had that made it to where she sometimes had to be late to work, why would she not recognize that in other people with disabilities, especially when they've been presented as a person with a disability? There should be certain triggers that are enacted when they find out that a person is, diagnosed with a disability, and if they're receiving any type of federal funding for their housing. These connections are not being made, and that's what's leading to the case backlog and illegal evictions, because the advocacies and supportive services that should be available for these low income renters and renters with disabilities, these services are being hidden basically, or they're being used for other resources, um, except the ones that they're supposed to be using them for. So this report goes into showing, um, let's see right here, this table one, 10 most common plaintiffs by number of detainer warrants from 2017 to 2019 in Davidson County, Tennessee. Between 2017 and 2019, Metro Development and Housing Agency was responsible for 6,018 of those uh, 31,000 evictions. So they're the main evictor, Metro Development and Housing Agency. There's a couple more on there. Urban Housing Solutions, that's supposed to be an affordable housing provider, and Woodbine Community Organization. Uh, Emmleton Property Management, they're one of the main um, property management companies that have taken over a lot of these older, what do you call them, tax credit properties. So this right here shows the attorneys that are being used. That attorney right here, M. Wesley Hall III, he is the attorney that was used in Rutherford County to help get the eviction that I experienced in 2018 awarded. The thing is, out of both of the evictions that I've experienced, none of them are on my credit report because I've fought each one. And even though they evicted me wrongfully, um, it doesn't show up on my credit report. Now, some people could say, well, you ought to be grateful it doesn't show up on your credit report. No, I would be grateful if someone would actually enforce the law and not allow these courts to grant evictions that should not be granted, especially when we have evidence of providing proof of codes violations and abatement notices from the codes departments. If nobody's going to hold the landlords accountable to make sure that the properties are habitable, you're going to, of course, you're going to see an increase of homelessness and evictions because all the courts are doing is making sure they get their money one way or the other. They don't care what they're signing off to. Um, so I think this report really goes into a lot of details to show what's really going on. And let's just to kind of summarize the importance of focusing on Metro Housing Development Agency. We all know that for the most part, the housing developments are predominantly African Americans. I'm not saying that there's no white people living in them, but I am saying that for the most part, it's us that's there. And so, with that high number, I can guarantee you that it's most of us that are facing those evictions now or experiencing those evictions. And the other thing that I need to point out is when families are evicted from public housing, a lot of times they don't automatically go straight into the shelters or um, onto the encampments where the tent cities are and stuff. A lot of times they will do what we call couch surfing. Well, I believe that if there's evidence of an eviction, a recent eviction, um, the fact that a person begins to couch surf should not disqualify them for emergency housing assistance. Um, we it's almost like you they want us to live in the most degrading situations just to have the right to ask for assistance, when the reality is we would not be needing assistance at all if the rules as far as the codes enforcement and stuff like that were being followed. But they don't want to have that conversation. I can say that I can say that if we could get the codes department to actually do better as far as following up on reports of violations, then that would be that would eliminate majority of the problem. Um, I'm trying to see how to get this other document up here. Okay, so now let's talk about once you are evicted. If you're a person with a disability, um, or just a homeless person, they have what we call a continuum of care. And a continuum of care is a regional or local planning body that coordinates housing and services funding for homeless families and individuals, primarily using funding received through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD identifies four necessary parts of a continuum. They are outreach, intake, and assessment, and that's in order to identify service and housing needs to provide a link to the appropriate level of both. They also have emergency shelters to provide immediate and safe alternative to sleeping on the streets, especially for a homeless family with children. They also have transitional housing with supportive services to allow for the development of skills that would be needed once permanently housed. Number three, the other one is permanent supportive housing to provide individuals and families with an affordable place to live with services if needed. Now, for the most part, if you get evicted, You should be able to get in touch with an outreach intake or an assessment, and they put you in the system to help you get housed. Now, sometimes you may find yourself going to an emergency shelter, but if on the day that you sign up for services through the outreach program, if you're sleeping in your vehicle, they're supposed to document that you're sleeping in your vehicle, and then you're supposed to let them know that you're just trying to get rehoused, permanently housed. Um, and they may tell you that right now the only thing we can help you with is emergency shelter until we get you transitional or permanent supportive housing. What's happening is that people are getting in touch with the outreach or intake people, and they're not being entered into the system. And then because they're not being entered into the system, they're not being connected with the resources to help them get permanently housed. Now, this does not apply to everybody. Now, some people are able to get access to this. It's almost like they cherry pick. But if you're a person that's very knowledgeable, and I like to say, like, I kind of know a lot about this because I've worked in this field before I even, received my diagnosis of, a disability. So if you come in knowing what should be happening, and you kind of find yourself speaking up for what you know to be true, they don't really like that. They feel like you're stepping on their toes. And so what happens is that they will they'll misplace your application, throw it away, put it on the back burner, act like there's no funding, do a whole bunch of things to prevent you from getting housing, permanent housing. The goal is to permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is for people with a documented permanent disability and a chronic history of homelessness. Um, and that's not supposed to be used for anybody else unless they specifically qualify under those criteria. Um, what they've done, they've created a program called the Creating Homes Initiative, and this is ran through the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And so within this Creating Homes Initiative, they have regional housing facilitators. The regional housing facilitator for Region 4 is Bill Friskus Warren of Park Center, Nashville. And they also have a regional substance use housing facilitator. So that's the person that would be over helping house someone that qualifies or that receives services through the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Um, every region has a different person. They also have, for the state of Tennessee, homeless services for children and youth. Now, the Children and Youth Homeless Outreach Project provides outreach and case management for homeless families or those at risk of homelessness to identify children and youth with severe emotional disturbances or at risk of SED. The program then assists parents to secure needed mental health services for children and other family members in need. Assistance to find or restore secure housing is also provided, including temporary financial assistance with rent, utilities, and other needs that will assist the child with SED and help keep the family intact. Now, the providers that they have for different locations or regions, um, like this is the Shelby County area. Uh, this is for like East Tennessee, Carter County, Greene, Hancock, Washington, the Frontier Health. For Knox County and Hamilton County, it's Helen Ross McNabb Center. For Davidson County, Montgomery County, Rutherford, and Sumner is Mental Health Cooperative. These are the people that should be able to, if you have a child, if you're homeless and your child is dealing with severe emotional disturbance, or at risk of severe emotional disturbance, which um, being chronically homeless and living in poverty and the trauma caused by a lot of the things that go on in low income areas would result and often result in people suffering from a lot of issues that we never even get to receive any assistance or um, care to address. because we're just forced to keep going. And then when you do try to take time to get assistance or to acknowledge that you need help, people often um, will judge you or criticize you based on your uh, um, acknowledging that you have a issue that you need help with. And in my opinion, we all have issues that we need to work on. Some may deal with things a little better than others, but I don't think any of us are just perfect. Considering everything that we've lived through as a people, we all are probably suffering from some type of mental health condition. So, back to Creating Homes Initiative. Let's see. So the purpose of the Creating Homes Initiative is to seek to assertively and strategically partner with local communities to educate, inform, and expand quality, safe, affordable, and permanent housing options for people with mental illnesses and co occurring disorders. The program was created in August of 2000 by Marie Williams, current commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, in response to the lack of safe, decent, quality, permanent, and affordable housing options for persons with mental illnesses in Tennessee. Today, along with the director of regional housing facilitators, there are 6 regional housing facilitators and 7 Creating Homes Initiative regional substance use housing facilitators who work in collaboration with the Continua of Care to create and develop safe, affordable, quality, permanent housing options for persons diagnosed with a mental illness or co occurring disorder along a continuum from 24/7 supervised living facilities to home ownership. Notice they said home ownership. So there's a program for people with mental illnesses that can help them become homeowners. How many of us are ever actually explained how to access that part of a program? What I've been told is that none of the housing services that have been provided for people with disabilities, homeownership isn't an option at all. I don't really understand why that's specifically not an option for people with mental illnesses, but based on what I'm reading right here, they include home ownership. So um they give out the strategies for success and everything. Um and this is how it normally works. But I'm here to say it looks good on paper. It looks very, very good on paper. And ain't nothing wrong with that. Okay. Um the issue I think we're having is that we can't get what's on paper to actually to show up in services available for us. Um, this is just all of the ways that they can help, and this is I put this on here sideways, and I apologize for that. But access to mental health care, access to primary care, integrated care, affordability, transportation, identifying supplemental resources, peer recovery support, supported employment, SSI, SSDI outreach, access and recovery. They call that SOAR, individualized plans, and social skills. This is all part of what they consider serving the whole person in the Creating Homes Initiative. This is all of them at a meeting, the directors of homeless housing and homeless services for the state of Tennessee. These are all the partnership and stakeholders. So these are all of the people that should be working in direct connection with them. Recipients of behavioral health services. So, like me, I'm a recipient. Fellow state agencies, policymakers, HUD continuums of care, state, regional, and local community groups and organizations, funding entities, housing developers, behavioral health and service providers, substance use treatment and recovery service providers, advocacy groups and organizations, professionals and program services staff, faith based community, Medicaid, volunteers, psychiatric hospitals. All these people should be working together to make this a thing. Um, Best practices, collective brainstorming, funding sources, so forth and so on. But all this is already documented. This was started in the year 2000. These are the directors. The director of Tennessee Department of Housing and Substance Abuse Services. I guess the Housing and Homeless Service provider is Nuru Gobin. I guess that's how you say his name. Then Janine Price. I'm just going with that. So I know I've spoken via email to mostly everybody that is involved in these, programs. Um, and I have documentation of that. And that's one of the things that I want to kind of highlight, because what I'm finding is that, and I'm not going to start with this one. Once again, just based off like the first when that video I let you all hear a little earlier, um, when you start speaking up or speaking out about certain things that are going on, um, they will try to label you as a troublemaker, or you're just complaining, or they'll find all types of ways to make you sound just like you're just out here angry for no reason, or you're asking for favors or things that they can't do. And I personally know that the things that I'm specifically asking about, I'm not asking for any favors. I'm asking for them to just follow the guidelines of what they said they were going to do. I'm trying to get the right thing up here. Is it not going to let me get that? Hmm. Let me try to get my files added up here right. So the next one I want to go over is, okay, maybe I had the right one up. Let's see. Um, okay. All right, we're going to go with this one. Now, the regional housing facilitators that I was reading off to you all earlier, his name is Bill Friskus Warren. This is a email thread that Bill wrote to several of the people in the Tennessee continuums of care, um, concerning my need for housing. And so I'm going to read it out to you. He says, colleagues, pasted below is the text of an email message I sent Carlos Asaguda, the regional director of fair housing for HUD in 2018, imploring him to use the resources of his department to look into and, if at all possible, restore justice to the case of April Norris. Mr. Asaguda assigned the case to a member of his department for investigation, but regrettably, no further action was taken. Ms. Norris, I believe, is familiar to most of you included in this email thread, and I continue to believe that there must be a way to resolve her protracted housing crisis in a way that is satisfactory to all concerned, especially to Miss Norris and her daughter. I don't have the authority to restore Miss Norris's Shelter Plus Care voucher or grant her another housing subsidy, but I surely but surely some resource, HUD sponsored or otherwise, must be available to relieve her family's suffering and distress. Miss Norris has been a tenacious advocate for herself and her daughter. Such vociferousness might make some of us uncomfortable, but it should not keep those who have the power to effect change from doing something in Miss Norris's case. The fact that she represents several protected classes under federal statute should further motivate us to work for equality, equity, and justice in her case. With gratitude for your attention, Bill Friskes Warren. Now, that was sent back on May the 14th of 2020. Now, mind you, I was evicted most recently, February the 13th of 2020. So here's him reaching out to all of the people that were in position to help me get housing or to get me enrolled into their system, their outreach, where they're supposed to do the assessment and everything. That was his reaching out. Now here's another email that he sent to Carlos Asaguda on August the 28th of 2018. And this was, a week or so after I was evicted in 2018. So he's saying, and this is sent to HUD, Mr. Asaguda, I recently heard you address a gathering of affordable and fair housing advocates in Nashville, Tennessee, and found your words both inspiring and hopeful. Your commitment to just and fair housing practices was abundantly felt. For this, you have my utmost gratitude. Today, I'm writing to you concerning Miss April Norris, who, as indicated by the release of information form attached to this message, has given me her consent to appeal to you on her behalf. Miss Norris, I understand, is well known to you and your colleagues at HUD, not just locally in Middle Tennessee, but also at the regional and federal offices of the department. The circumstances surrounding her recent eviction and loss of Shelter Plus Care housing voucher, formerly administered by Murfreesboro Housing Authority, are many and complex. I do not pretend to have a complete grasp of these circumstances, but I do know that Ms. Norris feels strongly that she has been treated unfairly and in a discriminatory manner. Once again, I understand that her case is a complicated one and that it may have bogged down and protracted and even acrimonious conflict. Even so, I can't help thinking that some more satisfactory both to Miss Norris and to HUD, remains possible. And I'm writing you to ask what steps might be taken to initiate such process, with the ultimate goal of reinstating Miss Norris's Shelter Plus Care voucher. Currently experiencing homelessness and living in her car, Miss Norris lives with a disabling condition and has been exposed to considerable trauma in her life. She is conscientious mother to her seventh grade daughter, who has likewise been traumatized by recent events and, of course, by the Norris's family's current housing crisis. All of which is to say that her previous conflicts with HUD notwithstanding, Miss Norris remains a human being, a mother in need of safe, affordable, low barrier, supportive housing, something that she is highly unlikely to find without the help of HUD and its affiliate agencies. I implore you and your colleagues on behalf of Ms. Norris and her daughter to examine the abundant resources of HUD and to identify and mobilize those that can restore Ms. Norris and her daughter to housing and health. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. Sincerely, Bill Friskes Warren, Regional Housing Facilitator and Park Center. So if the regional housing facilitator is reaching out to HUD specifically asking about helping, why am I being denied housing? None of the evictions on my record. What is the crime that I committed that puts me in a position to not deserve housing assistance? Because I spoke up about what was going on wrong. And if I was wrong for speaking up, say that. Say that I spoke out of turn, disrespected somebody, but to just do things that are not policy and procedure, to me, this is a problem. So here are emails me discussing um, the need for effective case management and housing navigation for a disabled homeless family. That's September 25th of 2018. So I go into a lot of details about what's going on between my case manager, the Murfreesboro Housing Authority, um, how they, had me. Let's see here. I could read all of that, but I'm not. I've got evidence of the housing authority, Deborah Fox, contacting the police department, trying to put me on no trespassing when all I was asking for was copies of my documents so that I could apply for housing. And so when all of this is going on, after I applied for housing, um, even though I experienced them trying to get me charged with trespassing and all that stuff that I was able to expose and document as fraudulent. Um, I've had to file a housing complaint talking about what happened with them, trying to put me on trespassing. So, like, I have been actually trying to follow every rule that could be followed to get assistance. So here I am, um, emailing them February the 12th of 2019 when I found out that the Section 8 voucher that I was applying for back, that I was trying to get my information from the housing authority um, so that I could complete back in, let's see, what date was this on? It was in October, I believe, when, let me make sure. Okay, so I'm writing this in September. And so within that time, from the time of August through September, let me get these dates correct. Let me see. This okay, yeah, September 25th. This is when she first called the cops and said that I was, trespassing. So after that, this is me documenting the claims of trespassing. So here this is in February, and this is when I'm asking her about my Section 8 application, which I was told um, by my caseworker that his supervisor instructed him not to process the application due to lack of funding through MDHA. So I'm trying to figure out how does that work, and why did you all not send me anything in the mail? Like, how did you plan on notifying me that the Section 8 voucher that I'm waiting on is not coming? So at all this time, I'm living in a temporary efficiency that's only not even one bedroom, waiting on them to get my Section 8 voucher, completed or processed so that I could move my daughter back with me, because in the efficiency it wasn't big enough for both of us. So when I, started dealing with issues from the landlord, habitability issues, it made me think to ask them, well, what's going on with my housing voucher, Section 8 voucher? Well, that's why I'm told they didn't even file it. Like, there's a lot of stuff that came up to where it didn't even get submitted. So here's them responding. Ms. Norris, the only way I know of to help the current situation is to upload your current income verification letters. If you would like me to upload these documents, please email them to me, and I'm happy to submit them. If you would rather not have, my issue with everything was I submitted that application in September of 2018. Here we are in February of 2019, and I'm just now finding out that it wasn't even submitted. And now they're wanting me to submit documents to actually submit my application. But that's putting me several months behind. And I feel like because it wasn't a mistake on my behalf, why am I the one having to now start over? And it's almost like nobody wants to be held accountable. So I'm pointing that out. And I say, Mr. Reasons, see the attached email dated November the 15th, 2018, that verifies that Safe Haven was aware of the fact that my Section 8 application was withdrawn before I contacted you on Tuesday, February the 12th. I have access to my income verification. However, I would really appreciate some honesty and accountability from you and your staff if it's not asking too much. So this went on for a little minute. Um, and this is just me, the conversation that went on with me and one of the caseworkers about, even when I tried to move into my apartment, it says, I'm explaining, I've been spending all my monthly income for hotel rooms and sleeping in my car on the days that I cannot afford a room. Um, I never intended to use my Shelter Plus Care voucher in a studio apartment, Brittany. Remember, I'm only getting the studio to stabilize myself until something permanent, big enough for me and my 14-year-old daughter. Um, Tell your supervisor the studio is temporary and I have the ability to choose the length of my lease, which it was, you can do it 6 months or 12 months or whatever. Um, and then I asked her in here, also ask your supervisor, when did they plan to inform me that my Section 8 application was not processed due to the lack of funding? That information would have been very helpful. And it's sad that I had to call Antonia myself today to find this out. So on this date is when I was told that the application didn't get submitted. So, and I'm explaining to her, this is February the 14th of 2019, it's all about accountability, as you and your staff have caused me a great amount of additional trauma that I feel could have been avoided. Um, and it's just me telling them how I feel about it. They don't really like that. I keep telling y'all that. So the person that I'm speaking to at this time back in 2019 is Jessica Ivy. She is the coordinated entry systems manager for Metro Homelessness Commission. Um, that is now, I think, what they refer to as the Metro Homelessness Impact Division, MHEAD, I'm assuming. But anyway, so here's the history of these conversations. See how they switched it up? Now she's the coordinated. Now this is, let's see, same time. This is February 15th, 2019. And on here, she's listing her uh, everything as the coordinated entry system manager for the Metropolitan Homeless Impact Division. So yeah, they're the same people. MHEAD. Um, so I go into here. This is during the time when my daughter had came and stayed with my father in 2019. And I'm explaining, being that my daughter is currently attending school in Knoxville and Knox County received 18 vouchers, maybe you can communicate with the Knoxville HUD staff, Miss Wilson and Eric Hoagland, who are over the Continuum of Care program, to work something out, as they too have witnessed and participated in the injustices that my family has experienced. So like everywhere I go, I'm pointing out the people that are the ones responsible. And notice, these emails, I'm including everybody in these emails. So they're all watching this take place. They're all also supposed to be working together to help eliminate the time that people are experiencing homelessness. So um she's apologizing for the inconvenience, but nobody's ever addressing any of the issues that I'm complaining about. So after me doing all of that, asking for one, I was in an efficiency that was not supposed to be considered permanent housing. And I got into the efficiency in December of 2018. Here we are a whole year later, I'm still in the efficiency. Where was the follow up to help me get put into permanent supportive housing or permanent housing? It never happened. And so then we come up to after the eviction, and here we are, October of 2020. Um, and I think I had started this email on October the 16th. Um, and I'm saying in it, hello everyone. Please see the attached email PDF of my attempt to receive assistance with shelter in Nashville, Tennessee, after being illegally evicted again on February 13th of 2020 from a unit that failed 2 codes inspections. My situation exposes the reason why our nation's homelessness is an epidemic all by itself: lack of compliance monitoring of the federally funded programs. As I have advocated for myself and others who have been negatively affected by this systemic lack of oversight since as early as 2013 in Middle Tennessee, even starting my nonprofit to address the gaps in this supportive service system, this should be evidence enough to convince you all that I will not stop until this injustice is addressed appropriately. I have a storage unit full of proof and evidence of everything that I've stated as my defense against both illegal evictions, and I started my nonprofit in December 2018 after sleeping in my car for 4 months while serving as a steering committee member of Homeless for All Nashville, even representing the city of Nashville at the Policy Link Anti-Displacement Conference in Austin, Texas. My arguments and defenses are based on facts, not personal opinions. Hopefully, we all can begin to work together to address this public matter. One of the people that are Reverend Ingrid McIntyre, founder and executive director of the Village at Glencliff. Her response is, April, I'm so sorry for all of the things you're experiencing right now and that you have felt, quote unquote, dropped by the system. It makes me sick. While I don't have a lot of power, quote unquote, power, I can possibly be helpful in filling in the gap. Has anyone else responded to you? Please let me know. Well, being that I sat in one of the meetings, the welcome home meetings, as far as, the Policy Link Anti-Displacement Conference with Ingrid, and I heard Ingrid say out of her mouth, she recommended for them not to hire a person that was interested in filling in one of the openings. And the reason why she said not to hire him was because he was crazy. So what she said to me was just a whole bunch of words. You know what I'm saying? Let me see. Now, I have some more things I wanted to show you. I guess I can let you listen to another. This is another video that's talking about the title of it is How Classism is Ripping America Apart. And this is the author, Harvard professor and political philosopher Michael J. Sandel discusses his new book, The Tyranny of Merit: What's Become of the Common Good.
Could turn bad. And Sandel explains a way out of the crisis is to dismantle meritocratic assumptions that have dubbed blue-collar workers less successful than their professional peers and recognize the dignity of their work. Author and philosopher, professor of government theory at Harvard University Law School, Michael J. Sandel joins us now for more on his vision of a virtuous society and to also discuss a potential advantage for Joe Biden among working-class Americans this November. Great to have you, Professor. Thank you for being with us.
Good to see you, Sarah. Good to be with you. Good to be with you.
Just lay out a little bit the central premise of your work, and it's actually something we talk a lot about on this show, the problem with this concept of the meritocracy and the goal of American public policy being to essentially perfect that meritocracy.
Well, Crystal, the main purpose of the book is to try to make sense of what's gone wrong with our civic life. Why the deep polarization? And it begins with the growing divide between winners and losers in recent decades. And this has had the effect of demoralizing, even humiliating those who have left behind. And the reason is that it's not just about inequality of income and wealth. It's also about changing attitudes towards success. Those who've landed on top have come to believe that their success is their own doing, that they deserve the bounty the market showers on them, and that by implication, those who fell behind must deserve their fate as well. This generates the resentment that leads many working people to turn against the Democratic Party and mainstream parties and to embrace authoritarian populist figures like Donald Trump.
And Professor, just to push you a little bit, I mean, you kind of work at one of the scions. You work at Harvard University, one of the places where a lot of the people who I have met who most ardently hold these beliefs kind of come from. So what has gone wrong in our most elite institutions like Harvard to imbue a character of this meritocracy and making people feel so superior to working Americans that has generated animosity on both sides?
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. And I do write in the book about the problem of the meritocratic hubris of elites and the tendency of elites to look down on those less fortunate, less credentialed than themselves. I think at the heart of the problem is that we have in recent decades cast universities as the arbiters of opportunity. This is largely a result of the political message that Democrats and Republicans alike have offered in dealing with the inequalities that have resulted from globalization. Instead of tackling them head on, they've said instead, they've offered a rhetoric of rising individual upward mobility by getting a university degree. What you earn will depend on what you learn, they told us. You can make it if you try. This has made a university degree, preferably from a brand name university, the ticket, or so the politicians promise, to upward mobility. But I think that's the wrong way to think about how to deal with inequality, because most Americans, after all, don't have a 4-year university degree. Nearly 2/3 don't. So we need to create an economy that addresses the needs and affirms the dignity of everyone, regardless of how lustrous their credentials.
And in a way, what you're saying, while it makes a lot of sense to me, is very controversial, because you're sort of talking about a different view of the American dream, right? The classic version of the American dream is like, in an ideal world, everyone has a chance to go out and work hard, get that education, and make it in American society. And the corollary to that is, if you don't make it, there's something wrong with you, which gets into that word humiliation that you used, which I think is really true and is also a very powerful emotion, very powerful way to feel and create some of these outcomes that we've seen. But has the American dream always included that sort of like corollary of humiliation? Is that a modern invention? And how would you shift the way that we think about these things?
Well, it's true that there is something that may be provocative and controversial in my diagnosis of what's gone wrong. And I should emphasize, broadening access to higher education is a good thing. I'm deeply in favor of it. How could I be against it? I've spent my life in higher education. And yet, casting a college degree, making that a necessary condition in our economy for dignified work and a decent life, that's the problem. The problem is making that degree a condition for dealing with inequality, as if individual upward mobility itself could solve the problem. And it brings out, as you're suggesting, and here's where people may disagree, but I think it brings out the dark side of meritocracy, which is that those who land on top begin to inhale too deeply of their success and to look down on those who lack the college degrees that the politicians tell us are a necessary condition for rising, for competing and winning in a global economy. That's a harsh ethic of success. It generates anger and resentment, and I would say legitimate grievances among those who are left out, those who face stagnant wages, but not only that, a kind of loss of social esteem and respect and dignity. And that's what I think we're missing in our politics. I think that's what the Democratic Party continues to miss. And unless they address this sense of humiliation and exclusion, they're going to have a hard time rivaling the kind of populist politics of humiliation and grievance represented by Donald Trump.
And then last question for you, sir. How do we fix it? Is it a political problem? Is it a civic problem? Is it a mixture of both? What are the solutions you propose?
It's both. It's both. I think we should reconsider the idea that universities are arbiters of opportunity who define merit in a highly competitive meritocratic society. We should rethink that and invest more in community colleges, in vocational and technical training in order to enhance the status and prestige and recognition of a great many working people. I think we need to put the dignity of work right at the center of political debate. That, not individual mobility through a university degree, is a broader, more democratic way of addressing the loss of esteem that a great many working people feel.
And to pause on what he's saying, speaking about work, if nothing else, that this, in my opinion, that this COVID-19 pandemic has exposed or sparked is more people are deciding to go into business for themselves, or they're finding ways to be satisfied with living with less, or finding ways to not have to actually go to work for the system. They call it leaving the plantation. And you have a whole divide amongst that, because you got some people that feel like everybody just needs to go back to work, and that'll make the economy go back the way it's supposed to be. But the division and the inequities of even getting employment, unless that's addressed, like, and I agree with what this man is saying, we need to put just as much respect on people with certifications. I'll say just as much as we put on people with degrees. And it's that concept of you need to respect the janitor just like you respect the director. But what we tend to not look at is, me specifically, the work that I put into speaking up for myself and others. It's real work, and it's work that most people, if you go in and you're working for a organization or a company, and you're having to do the research and put together the correspondences and stuff, you get paid well to do so. So when you're not getting a paycheck because you're actually going against the masses, you have people that look down on you because you've not been able to actually receive compensation for the efforts that you put in, so that you're not looked at as being successful. And it takes a real strong person, and I consider myself to be strong, even though I have my weaknesses as well, and I have my good days as well as bad days, but I understand my purpose. So I'm not determining my self-value or my self-worth based on how much money I'm able to bring in, because I know that the things that I'm trying to see happen is not based on how big my paycheck is. This is about what type of changes that I can get initiated, even if they're not willing to give me the credit that I deserve. I know that as a person that was going through the system trying to benefit and to receive the services that I'm advocating for, the fact that now I can see where more people are actually able to receive those benefits, I know that me speaking up has made a difference. I know this because even if there's only a handful of people that will speak up on my behalf, when they speak, they let it be clear that I'm not only known locally by the agencies in Middle Tennessee, Nashville, Knoxville, but nationally, HUD understands and knows who I am on a first name basis. And so when I see myself having to explain to people um why what I do for a living, or why I'm constantly seeming to be bickering with these people, uh it does get frustrating because I feel like I have to explain this to the people that I'm arguing with already, but to have to explain this to my own people that look just like me, and I'm fighting for things that will be beneficial to them as well. I can't even get people to understand it, and the reason why is because we're all guilty of having our own forms of racism and classism, regardless of whether or not we want to accept it or not. You have some people that look at a person that receives Social Security disability as living off of the system, leeching off the system, which doesn't make any sense because if you receive Social Security disability, it's based off of your work history. Um, I keep telling people that, for one, if you can't you can't have stable housing, the chances of you having a stable career are very slim to none. And so for you to put those type of expectations on people or even on yourself, you're almost setting yourself up for failure. So it's not that I have become content with not having the things that I know I'm uh, worthy of receiving. It's just that I know that with me staying true to myself and speaking the truth that I am, it's going to be very hard for those people to want to help me, because helping me would require them to admit what they've done wrong. But that's okay, because just a couple weeks ago, June the 14th of 2022, this is Bill Friskus Horn reaching back out to the people in Nashville. Um, April Calvin and Jay Servius, whatever I guess that's how you say his name. Just checking back with you about the appeal on behalf of April Burns Norris and her daughters that I made to you last week. As he emailed them last week, the week before this. He says, I know that the two of you have tremendous amounts on your plates, but certainly Miss Burns Norris's circumstances and needs are no less pressing. I'm copying her here so that you or someone else at Metro Homeless Impact Division can help her resolve her ongoing housing crisis. And this is what he said to them. Now, my issue, and I mean, up until before he sent that, I'm even communicating with them. Um, I was most recently evicted on February 13, 2020, while living in Nashville, and I remain without permanent supportive housing. This is me speaking to them about being on the continuum of care membership, and will me being on that board interfere with me obtaining housing? And it's also in response to the report, the National Homelessness report, and I was just letting them know that I'm still in need of housing and so forth and so on. So this is April Calvin responding. Greetings, Bill, and sincere apologies to April Burns Norris. I will connect you with a representative from our coordinated entry team or outreach team to ensure you are in the proper process for housing services. Will you please provide your phone number? MHEAD is simply the planning and coordinating entity helping to guide housing efforts. Housing funds are distributed to community partners and housing agencies, not necessarily used internally at MHEAD. As we do not provide any direct services out of this office, I would not and could not circumvent any systems nor community process and procedures currently in place to coordinate these efforts. But I can connect you with the appropriate organization or agency once we have more information. April, are you connected with any housing organizations to access your resources? To access resources. Once you provide your contact information, Keith Alexander, outreach coordinator, will be in contact with you to help guide you through the process. Thank you for your efforts and willingness to help, even during your time of need. Okay. Um, Mind you, this is 2022 when she's responding, but I was showing you all emails from 2018, 2019, 2020 of me reaching out when I was actively like recently evicted. And so now she's asking, to get information 2 years later. So I respond to her, April, thank you for your response. I have been connected to multiple housing organizations to assess resources since I was last evicted back in February 2020 in Nashville, Tennessee. My long history of homelessness and the lack of access to housing and supportive services is what led me to start my own nonprofit organization and my continued advocacy work while experiencing homelessness. In my opinion, it's the lack of communication across the COCs and the proper documentation within the HMIS and coordinated entry system that has caused my circumstances to go unaddressed for this long. I'm not asking for you to cut any corners or to do me any favors. I'm only asking that you encourage the existing COC, housing and supportive services agencies to actually collaborate to address this overlooked issue that has left me homeless since February 2020 with no eviction on my record to support me losing my housing in the first place. All I've been advocating for is housing and supportive services for individuals and families like mine who happen to live with a disabling mental illness while experiencing chronic homelessness. I'm not sure why it's been so difficult to receive any assistance, but if you find out, I would love to know. My contact information is below, and my chronic homelessness is discussed in detail in my attached federal complaint. I've also attached a copy of the transitional housing proposal that I know my lived experience could help establish in Nashville, Tennessee, if given the opportunity and community support. Thank you in advance for connecting me to the appropriate organizations, including the coordinated entry team or outreach team, to ensure that I'm in proper process for housing services. So, um, after all of that, this is Susie, who is over the Metro Housing Development Agency and the Continuum of Care, saying, April Burns Norris, since there are two Aprils on this email, there are indeed attendance requirements to vote in COC matters, 50% or more of the meetings in the year before the vote, but not to join a committee. Let me attach the list of current committees, and perhaps one of them will interest you. The list is from last year, but should give you a good idea. I will then reach out to the chair of the committee to see if they need more members and any particular skills they may be short on. Most committees meet once a month, and some are more seasonal in nature and don't meet all year, like charter revision or nominating. All right. So I'm telling her which ones I was interested in. Now, after I go through talking to Keith Alexander, um, Keith Alexander reached out on, I think, June the 14th. And he was supposed to be getting back in touch with me. So I hadn't heard anything from him. So on June the 20th, I messaged him. I said, "Good afternoon, Keith. I'm just checking to get an update on the process of getting me re entered into the coordinated entry system in Nashville." Um, and that was on Monday, June the 20th at 2:02 p.m. He doesn't respond until Wednesday, June the 22nd at 8:59 p.m. saying, I have not forgotten about you! Exclamation point. I will call you tomorrow. Now, just to, I ain't got no lies to tell. Um, I can't get it to show up right. Just know it's a conversation going on here. I'll print it out later. So I responded at 9:21 p.m. Are you yelling at me or are you just excited for some reason? Either way, I look forward to hearing from you tomorrow. Have a good night. So that's Wednesday. Thursday, the next day at 12:47 p.m., he responds saying, I would never yell at you. So I responded at 12:59 saying, good. Anyways, I'm looking forward to speaking with you to get any updates you may have for me. I was waiting on your call yesterday. So that was Friday when I said I was waiting on your call yesterday. Saturday, he responds on this is June the 25th at 2:32. I need to complete another coordinated entry assessment and v, the VISBDAT. It's a survey to kind of determine your vulnerability and all that stuff. And he says, call me Monday after 11 and we can complete it over the phone. So this is where I believe things went left for Mr. Keith and me. I said, I would ask that we use the ones completed when I became homeless and was never provided permanent housing. But I'm guessing that one would be considered outdated and would not reflect my current temporary situation well, I messed up on this text, but living in since leaving Nashville after remaining in my vehicle from February 2020 through October 2020 when I returned to Nashville. In other words, I'm not interested in allowing the truth of my eviction and homelessness to be covered up by completing a new record in your system. Also, it seems like it would be a duplication of services considering that I completed one here in Knoxville back in October 2021. I'm currently at risk of homelessness due to remaining in this temporary location while waiting on housing placement in Knoxville, but I should have been assisted in Nashville where I actually lived when I was last evicted. You may want to collaborate with my PATH caseworker here in Knoxville to get a more clear understanding of the extensive delay and lack of accurate documentation of my housing instability. But I will definitely call you so that we can update/document this in your system on Monday. So Monday came and I tell him at 5:52, I said, I'm working with my PATH caseworker to apply for housing here in Knoxville. So if we don't have any success with getting my application submitted this week, I will call you to finish the Nashville coordinated entry system process. I just wanted to keep you posted. That was on Monday. On Wednesday, no, that was on Monday. So Tuesday, he responds at 5:48. After I've done told him that, he should work with my caseworker in Knoxville, he responds, Miss April Burns Norris, per HUD policies, you have to be a resident of Davidson County to be entered into the Metro Homeless Impact Division's HMIS. Per your text message, I cannot update the coordinated entry system that was completed in 2018 because it does not reflect your current living situation. When you return to Davidson County and you meet the HUD's definition of literal homelessness, I will be more than happy to complete a coordinated entry assessment and enter you into the HMIS. Below, I have attached the link to the MDHA. So I responded to him via text message, good afternoon, and in email. Good afternoon, Keith. Please check your email for my response and attachment submitted in dispute to your email from yesterday. I have attached a few screenshots for you just in case you have trouble locating the attachments. Please forward me the complaint form or the contact information for where to file a grievance/complaint concerning how you and everyone involved has mishandled this entire process while attempting to rewrite the truth. Thank you in advance for sending me the correct information to file a grievance against you and M-Head. So my issue that I have with all of this, and this is what I emailed him in response. Per our conversation attached below and the numerous conversations had with everyone included in this email, I made it clear from the beginning that I've been here in Knoxville temporarily since being evicted from a shelter plus a safe haven family shelter rapid rehousing assistance efficiency unit on February the 13th of 2020 while living in Nashville, where I remained living in my vehicle until returning to Knoxville in October 2020 to provide care to my terminally ill father who passed away on May the 28th, 2021. I feel as though you and everyone included in this email thread just wasted my time and added to the trauma that I've already experienced as a result of Safe Haven Family Shelter failing to inspect the efficiency unit that they used rapid rehousing funding to house me in that failed multiple Metro Codes inspections, resulting in my eviction on February 13, 2020. Furthermore, as documented in the attached screenshots, my PATH case manager is the one that suggested that I be entered into both systems to see if I could be housed quicker through one or the other. I had a Section 8 application submitted in Nashville that was purged for reasons, I meant to put for unknown reasons, while I was waiting on permanent housing placement before I was evicted in February 2020. I do not agree with your decision, and based on the attached text messages and email conversations, as well as the purge Section 8 application, I would like to file a grievance/complaint against you and Metro Homeless Impact Division as soon as possible. I will not allow you all to continue to punish me for the mistake of your colleagues, and the court documents from the February 2020 eviction documents the inhabitable conditions that Safe Haven Family Shelter used its rapid rehousing funds to place me in temporarily while failing to ensure follow-up case management and permanent housing placement. These documented facts will not be erased no matter how much you attempt to make it appear as though you all have ever followed HUD policies and procedures. Please forward me with the complaint form and provide me with the contact information for who handles the complaints. So, here's Sally Lott. Now, Sally is now where it used to be Jessica Ivy. Now, Sally Lott is the coordinated entry manager for Metro Homeless Impact Division. See, they shuffle them around. They get promotions and all kinds of stuff just for not doing their job. So here's Sally. Good afternoon, Ms. Burns Norris. I was given your contact information by my colleague, Keith Alexander. My name is Sally Lott, and I'm the coordinated entry CE manager for Nashville, Davidson County. Keith informed me that you were inquiring and would like to file a formal grievance as regard to coordinated entry. The current grievance procedure is to email regarding the grievance. As the coordinated entry manager, I will respond in 2 to 3 business days. I'm attaching the most recent coordinated entry policy and procedures manual. The grievance procedure begins on page 15. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions. And I let her know, thank you for contacting me. I will review your manual and email you my complaint within 2 to 3 days as well. So, after all of that started on June 14th this year, after everything that I said and all of the history of everything that's been going on, because I feel like the result was because I was telling him, we're not going to forget about how y'all left me from February to October with no assistance, nobody following up, even though Bill had sent out these emails. Colleagues, this was on May the 14th of 2020. This was like February, March, April, May, 3 months after I had been homeless 3 months when he sent this email out. Where was the person entering me into the coordinated entry system then, helping me find out which housing that was, available? Where was that? It didn't happen. But you'll have people acting like I'm the one dropping the ball or I'm the one causing the problems when I can show you so many, like, here's documentation, proof of them acknowledging Nobody's doing what they're capable of doing. And there's all this federal funding floating around here. But what hurts the most for me is that my own people won't even say anything. My own people are acting like I need to do more. And to me, that really does leave you in a position where you start thinking, well, dang, if my folks that's they always holler about, if you ain't black if you don't vote Democrat. Well, the black people that are in position to do something about what's happening to me, they act like they don't know me, because they don't want to risk losing the breadcrumbs and the funding that they're getting, that they're getting it because they're claiming to represent the black communities. But go to the NAACP and ask them to help you argue a discrimination complaint that you have against the housing authority and see what happens. See how fast they help you. Go to the Urban League and see how fast go to Legal Aid and see how fast they help you address any of these issues. They're going to tell you they don't handle landlord tenant disputes. Okay, well then who does? Not Tennessee Fair Housing Council, not Tennessee Human Rights Commission. Nobody wants to be the one to address this because they're all working together with them. You can pull this up on a lot of their websites. Even, okay, I'm going to take you back to the Red Door Collective. If I can find it, if I ain't done erased it all. And that's all it. Okay. So, okay. In this Red Door Collector. Now, this will let you see on the contact information and acknowledgement. We would like to thank the following groups and people for their contributions to this document. Davidson County Clerk's Office, Cynthia George, the People's Alliance for Transit Housing and Employment, which is PATH. Now, PATH was in connection with Homes for All Nashville. We were all part of the Policy Link Anti-Displacement Task Force. So we all work together. Then there's Tennessee for Safe Homes Coalition members, the Nashville Conflict Resolution Center, and the Middle Tennessee chapter of Democratic Socialists of America. Now, see, this is where politics comes into this. Even though they're speaking up and against housing discrimination, because they are being backed by the Democratic Socialists of America, the Middle Tennessee chapter, if you're not in cahoots or if you're not in collaboration or in agreement with their policies and procedures, the chances of them helping you is slim to none, because you're not going to further help them push their agenda. Now, additional resources. When they're listing these people as resources, people that contributed to this document, notice they say National Resolution Center. So they're going to add their information so you can use them. Workers' Dignity. Workers' Dignity is owned, ran, and operated by the same people that run PATH. Same couple. Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands. Open Table Nashville. Open Table Nashville is also working with the PATH and the Workers' Dignity. See, PATH down here, see how they're out? And this little center here, that's where we used to go and have a lot of our trainings, the Know Your Rights workshops and stuff like that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them collaborating together to do what they're trying to do. But just because I'm choosing to stay neutral, I'm not choosing one political party or the other, then my needs and my issues go unaddressed. That's what's happening. And so when my own community of people are refusing to speak up about issues that we know are affecting us, mainly, the driving while black, the targeting of the public housing authorities, when we know that we make up the majority of the people living in those public housing authorities. Like, that should be a public community-wide concern, because when we look out at the homelessness rates and the people that are dying while homeless, it's a lot of us. And the reality is they had, when they're doing these outreaches at the encampments and helping get people housed over there, um it's almost like if you're not to that degree of, like for me, I prefer to stay in my car rather than to go into the homeless shelters, especially during the time where COVID was floating around bad. I'm not going to go in there into a breeding ground to catch COVID when I know that I can just stay in my vehicle. Um, but it didn't mean my need for housing was any less urgent. And considering there were programs that they knew about that was supposed to help, if not just homeless families, homeless students, none of that was ever utilized for me. It still hasn't been utilized. And so that's what majority of my complaints have been about. But my complaints are not only my complaints. These should be issues that we all are concerned about, because it might not be affecting you right now, but eventually everything kind of circles around. Um, let me see. I think it was one more recording I wanted to play. Find the end of this one, because
that I'm talking to you, and after this talk is done, and when you find yourself in debates with people, and so for me, it may be standing up here as a Black woman and telling you things that actually happened to me, and it doesn't feel good because I'm opening up myself to being ridiculed, to being judged, to being criticized. And no one wants that. It's why the conversations that we Black people have when we're with each other is very different than the conversations we have when we're in mixed company, because we've been told you're playing the race card, that's not real, and all sorts of things. And on the other end, the vulnerability may be you don't want to ask a question and have somebody call you racist, or have someone say to you, Google is your friend, look it up. Or someone say to you, that's my emotional labor. I'm really glad that you finally come to the party, but we've been dealing with this for a long time, so you need to go figure that out. But we have to sit in that space of vulnerability and say to ourselves, no matter how messy it gets, no matter how painful it gets, that we will do it and we will do it again. And what that means is that we're going to be called sometimes to speak up, to stand up, and to do something. Because when we decide to build community with each other, when we decide to create belonging, what that means is that when something is happening to me, you speak. And when something is happening to you, we speak. And when somebody is saying something about your transgender daughter, that I speak. Because we belong to each other. And so it may be something as simple as taking out your bar card and interrupting the moment. Or it may require more from you. It may require you to give up your card of being the easygoing person at the Thanksgiving table when you have to say something to Uncle Bob. But we can do it, and it has to be done. Because silence in the face of tragedy and oppression is deafening, and we can't afford not to speak for each other. Which brings me to belonging, the fifth thing. We must begin to reinterpret how we define belonging. We live in these silos, isolated from one another, detached from the experiences from one another. But what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to believe in liberty, to believe in freedom, to believe in justice? What are those things for us? That's where we need to sit, to connect across our shared values, to say, how do I build a circle of belonging that encompasses humanity in a different way, that transcends differences, that transcends diversity, that transcends race? Because until we are able to do those things, we will not be able to tackle the problem of racism. Now, the truth is, I've told you some stories, and many of us in this room would probably never use the N word or B word, and we've cleaned it up, sanitized it as if that's how people talk. Except when somebody wants to strip you and degrade you, they do use the real words. And the challenge is that Charlottesville and Charleston is not how everyday racism shows up. It dresses up and wears high heels. and we normalize it. So I don't know about you, I find myself exhausted and wanting something new. And so I leave with you this definition of courage. An invitation to courageous being. That courage is doing the thing that you don't want to do, the thing that's icky, but it needs to be done. I invite you to do the thing that you don't want to do, but that needs to be done. Because it is in doing those things, small, repeating over and over, that we become courageous. Courage is a practice. But if we're going to create a new way of belonging and being in community, we must be courageous, and that's my invitation to you. And so as I walk off the stage, please remember that as we build belonging and community, locked eyes with a person who is not deserving of freedom, liberty, connection, and belonging. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to close this broadcast out with just going over this Nashville performance study of homelessness and affordable housing. And this was released in May of 2022. This was an assessment. Let's see. In our assessment of the Nashville Continuum of Care, we are encouraged by its many strengths within this vibrant city and network of agencies that make up its continuum of care. Many caring people are devoted to ending homelessness with those sleeping on the streets and within its shelters. You notice that's what they're focusing on. They don't look at couch surfing. However, majority of the time they don't have shelter space to provide space for the families with children. Anyways, these people and their agencies are doing their very best, but they are hampered by severe limitations within the system as a whole, the lack of clear, unified leadership towards a common goal, ending chronic homelessness and making all homelessness rare and brief. Despite the recent surge in federal funding, stimulus funding over the last 2 years, the number of people experiencing homelessness has barely changed over the years due to a reliance on legacy programs and programmatic practices that have not adapted to reflect national best practices or to provide the supports and housing interventions prioritized by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which provides the bulk of the funding for Nashville's continuum of care. Within the continuum of care, structural hurdles include lack of coordination and the need for clear governance, leadership, and performance management, particularly with respects to evidence-based best practices. Still, with key improvements, change is possible. With a streamlined and best practice governance model and realigned priorities, Nashville can strategically target resources to chronically homeless people and others who cannot end their homelessness without assistance. And with the system-wide use of a housing-first approach, the city can be assured that chronically homeless people can be successfully and stably housed. As we went over in all of the emails and the reaching out to all of the people that are involved with the continuum of care and the Metro Impact, homelessness division, whatever. As of January 2022 point in time count, there are roughly 1,900 individuals in the city experiencing homelessness. Of the total, 634 persons are living outdoors or in places not fit for human habitation, and cars are within city parks and streets of Nashville, so they are included in cars. So when I was living in my vehicle in February of 2020, and in May, Bill Friskus Warren reached out asking for their help. The lack of coordination and stuff shows with how they handled my case, but they don't want to. They want to make it look like I'm the problem. But here's the evidence. Now, when the court dates and the documents, the eviction documents match up to this time frame, I'm trying to figure out why nobody's addressing and going back and correcting all of the people that they know fell through the cracks with those evictions. But it says right here in Nashville, preliminary data for 2022 shows that the number of chronically homeless people slightly decreased by 42 individuals, but that still leaves approximately 500 chronically homeless people in the metro area, essentially 26% of the total, which is higher than the national average of 19%. So we've got a higher average than the whole nation on homelessness in Nashville. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development defines a chronic homeless person as someone who is disabled, lives in a shelter or place not meant for human habitation, and has experienced homelessness for at least 12 continuous months, or at least or on at least four separate occasions, equaling 12 months over the past 3 years. That applies to me. I've been homeless twice in 2 years, evicted twice in 2 years. Each time, been forced to stay in my vehicle for months on end. Um, it says because of Nashville high proportion of chronically homeless people, more people live on the streets for longer periods of time and are more likely to perish on the streets of our city. The mortality of people experiencing homelessness has doubled since 2016. HMIS and the MSS Indigent Burial Program information reported 89 deaths in 2016, and in 2021 there were 203 deaths in the homeless population. To date this year, there have been 49 deaths in 2022. The need for services and deeply affordable housing. To implement the Housing First model in Nashville will require a concerted investment in supportive services and access to deeply affordable housing, both of which are currently lacking within the city's continuum of care. Once people are housed in affordable apartments, Housing First caseworkers apply the on site supportive services that are crucial to the model's success. Because chronically homeless people need much more hands on assistance, including long term support for severe mental illness. Um, to create more deeply affordable housing will require action of the state and local levels to help both renters and homeowners, as illustrated in the tables on the next few pages. So everything that I've been arguing and saying in my emails for the past 2 or 3 years, this is what this study is basically confirming everything I've been saying. Um, it's just showing the challenges for even homeowners in Nashville, just like on that eviction report, how they're showing how their developers are coming in and it's pricing people out. So, in our assessment of the city of Nashville, we have seen firsthand that the continuum of care has many passionate and committed stakeholders eager to serve citizens who are experiencing homelessness and to help prevent those who are unstably housed from becoming homeless. They might be doing it for some people, but I can say specifically for me that did not happen. And that would make me ask, why did it not happen? Are you discriminating against me based on my skin color, or are you discriminating against me because of my disability? I don't know which one it is. All I know is that I haven't been able to receive any assistance. So they're saying we found effective communication and collaboration between Metropolitan Development and Housing Authority, which is the number one evictor in Davidson County. Remember, they were responsible from 2017 to 2019. They did like 6,000 and some odd evictions. So now they're working on them to collaborate because Metro Development and Housing Authority is the one over the continuum of care. Now, if they cause the evictions, what are the chances of them actually wanting to rehouse those people that they just evicted? And it would kind of look like you created a crisis so that you could come and save them. A crisis that didn't have to be. You just want, and you're looking for money. Okay, so MDHA, Metro Social Services, which is MSS, and Metropolitan Homeless Impact Division, and the Metro National Planning Department. All these people, they working together. They said they have effective communication and collaboration between all those departments. If that's the case, then when we reached out to MHEAD back in 2019 and 2020, they should have been reaching out to MDHA trying to find out what happened to my voucher and to get that reinstated. I don't know. So anyway, they said that each month the Housing Authority provides 18 housing choice vouchers Um, if used strategically, these vouchers can immediately impact the homeless landscape. I can't get one of them vouchers. So then they say they have a low barrier housing collective, a national best practice that provides landlord engagement incentives, funding to pay damages. You got a low barrier housing collective, but you don't have anybody enforcing the codes violations and making the landlords make repairs when the units fail inspections. So then it says the city is breaking ground on 90 units of permanent supportive housing on May the 31st, 2022, and the units are scheduled to be come online in 18 to 24 months. There is a commitment and resources from local government. The mayor's investment in homelessness includes staffing of MHEAD and investment of in the mayor's new $50 million housing first budget, ARP, American Rescue Plan Act funds, as outlined below. This is what they're going to do: 25 million over 3 years, adding affordable housing units through coordinated entry for very low income, is what they're saying. Permanent supportive housing funding will be designed to create program income to sustain housing and services. 9 million for housing first supportive services. 9 million over 3 years for low barrier gap housing, temporary housing for individuals and family waiting for housing units, and or permanent housing subsidies. That was what I needed, and that is also what we presented to the city in February of 2022 with our Faith Community Incorporated Transitional Housing Program proposal and the needs assessment. We did a whole proposal, and they said that wasn't something they was interested in, only for them to turn around 2 or 3 months later and say that they're going to create, and as a response to this study that's going on, now they're saying they're going to create gap housing. I'm just trying to figure out, if this has been part of the plan, why nobody has said anything or put me on a list so that I can at least know that, well, in one of these things that we're coming about with, we're going to try to correct what happened to you. That none of that's happening. Areas needing performance improvement. Unless changes are made, efforts by the continuum of care will be insufficient. The areas where improvement is needed are summarized here. The Homeless Planning Council in its current structure is cumbersome, lacks diversity, and has created a culture of distrust. Agreed. They don't have much representation of African Americans. It says previously, let me see, in a city that is 28% Black, 10% Latino, the 25-member council should have 7 Black members and at least 2 Latino members to match the demographics of the city itself. Instead, the council has 3 people of color, 2 African Americans, and 1 Latino member. Previously, there have been 5 African American members, but 2 resigned after the meetings became contentious. One of those members was subsequently hired by Metro. Other African American members of the council have stated that council meetings can often be aggressive, and at times Black members feel targeted and ignored. Yeah, they brought it out in this report. Homeless Planning Council members often have focused on micromanaging Metro's staff instead of rallying the community to provide comprehensive support to meet strategic goals and to end chronic homelessness. The continuum of care does not prioritize the chronically homeless. They sure don't. This is the truth. They do not. There's no way of making sure, like, there's no reason why I'm still not housed. There's no strategic targeting of resources towards long-term homeless. National studies show that many short-term homeless people, the people prioritized in Nashville, would have self-resolved their homelessness. They would have found housing with little or no help. That's where most of their funding is going, for people that can find housing with little or no help. And that's mostly rapid rehousing. National's lack of prioritization of the chronically homeless is not uncommon, but needs to be addressed as explained in a HUD notice about the matter. Shown that many communities and recipients of Continuum of Care program funded permanent supportive housing continue to serve persons on a first come, first served basis, and are based on tenant selection processes that screen in those who are most likely to succeed. These approaches to tenant selection have not been effective in reducing chronic homelessness, despite the increase in number of permanent supportive housing beds nationally. So, regardless of the amount of funding they're getting to permanently house people with supportive services, then you know it hasn't really reduced the chronic homelessness in Nashville. It says, as shown below in Figure 2, only 26% of the households placed into permanent supportive housing in Nashville over the last 5 years have met the HUD criteria for chronic homelessness of being homeless for at least 1 year. For more than 16% of the housing placements made between 2017 and 2022, data lacked length of homelessness. They ain't keeping that documentation because they don't want the truth to come out. And so that's why when I said, look, we can do a new intake, but we're not going to ignore the fact that I was homeless in 2020 and you all didn't get me entered into the system. Then he won't tell me, well, until you're based on the information now, y'all saw what he said, but okay, because I'm about to come back at him. That's why I'm doing this video as a reference point. After I do my email, I might include a link to the video. And so, let's see, number 4, the Continuum of Care Homeless Planning Council, which is currently the governing body of the Continuum of Care, is not currently set up to support effective governance. That's why they just operating out like they some mob. I don't know what they're doing, but they're not helping the people. All of this stuff is out now. So they're going to have a meeting on the 19th to go over this report because, Metro, the COC, and the Homeless Planning Council, they all ticked off about what came out in this report. The report telling the truth. Why are you mad at the truth? It says many of the homeless continuum of care COC permanent supportive housing sites require high barriers to housing, such as sobriety or unemployment. Making people prove that they are housing ready to be housed is an outdated practice that is no longer accepted by HUD. That's what they're doing, though. Limited flexibility and choice for the clients. Tenant-based permanent supportive housing utilize scattered sites need to be more effectively used. Too many rules. Participation in programming or case management cannot shelter with significant others. Right? Yeah, they don't have it to where a family can go and get shelter. It's just a lack of case gaps. It's just a lot of stuff that they say currently there are few effective partnerships with Tennessee state departments devoted to health, mental health, or housing. Nashville's housing efforts are affected by this lack of a united vision in clear ways, including these examples. Though there's an acute lack of affordable housing units in Nashville, the state does not incentivize the development of permanent supportive housing units or units for very low income and disabled tenants through its qualified action plan. This is a crucial gap since properly implementing housing first requires not only supportive services, but a steady supply of housing units that are willing to accept permanent supportive housing subsidies that can be affordable at 30% of the area median income. The Health and Human Services and Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services provide funding to state health departments for PATH outreach and support services for individuals with serious and persistent mental illnesses. All of these services would assist in addressing the chronically homeless population. So that was what I was trying to explain to them, was to work with my PATH caseworker to figure out how we can quickly house me. They don't want to do that. The continuum is ineffective in braiding streams of funding internally and in competitive external grants. Various federal, state, local, and private funding streams can be both braided and layered to improve existing programs and create new ones. And so while they are trying to come back and act like I'm asking them to do something that doesn't follow HUD policy and procedure, I'm actually trying to show them how to effectively utilize the various resources to help actually quickly house your people instead of trying to do it the way that makes sense, which is work together. They're wanting to keep the silos. Oh no, when you do it my way, then we can get you housed. Well, no, let's look at the fact that I lost housing in your jurisdiction. Therefore, you are just as responsible for housing me as these people are responsible for housing me. I pay taxes. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking you to do what my tax paying dollars are being said they're being used for. That's all. That's all, folks. So they go into the recommendations of what they need to do. They talk about how, as it stands, the overall number of overall homeless people in Nashville has barely changed since 2013. The number of people living outdoors has doubled since 2013, and the average length of time that individuals spend in homelessness has increased to nearly 200 days. I can tell you it's more than that, but that's what they got documented. They're getting an F. This is the stuff they need to do. Implement housing first. Not, you know, not well, when you're literally homeless again for the, first of all, you didn't do right when I was literally homeless. But now what you should be trying to do is prevent me from becoming literally homeless, not wait until you get literally homeless. It's crazy, y'all. But I'm just putting this out here just to show that I'm not creating this stuff up out of nowhere. This is all documented facts, what they're saying. And oh, it goes down. I got a link to the meeting, the council meeting where they all was discussing this report. Oh, they was really coming up out of character because they were mad because the truth got told. But guess what? Who's gonna be at that next one? Oh, they mentioning um the qualified allocation plan, Tennessee Housing Development Agency, all these people. The city must strengthen its relationship with the Tennessee Housing Corporation and invest in intensive case management to be paired with all housing investments. Exactly. Mm. In the place of, let's says, to lead the continuum, Nashville needs a strong, seasoned executive director to step in place of the current siloed leadership between MHEAD and MDHA. Exactly. That ain't going. I mean, because what's happening is they are working together to cause the homelessness. They tell them to restructure the homeless planning council. All I'm saying is they under reconstruction. So everything that I've been pointing out, look, they need to facilitate cross-system collaboration and coordination of services. I'm not asking for nobody to break the law. I'm saying do what you have these people come in here and do this for. If you're not gonna listen to nothing, so I've been on here over 2 hours, y'all. I am proud of myself because normally I can't make it this long. I got sleepy and stuff, but I did good. And the information is out here. So with that being said, I'm gonna wrap this up and say it like this right here. Until next time, with love, light, and life lessons learned the hard way. This is the People's Advocate, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.